As we discuss family finances, how to manage them well, how to live within a budget, how not to live outside your means, we have gone through many items that are supposed to be covered. And one last item we have to emphasize is the importance of a contingency item put in the budget. Remember, what we have said so far is that budgeting requires a very good process. Number one is to establish what you have been spending. In order to arrive at a budget, first of all, try to keep track of what you have been spending, and then compare it to your income to see how you have been. Even if you have not had a budget, it's important to spend time in order to come up with a budget and determine what you have been spending so far, maybe on a monthly basis or a yearly basis, and that will be important. Number two, having seen how that compares with your income, you can understand then why you have been having challenges. So you now go to make financial goals. Maybe you're already in debt. How many months or years can it take you to come out of debt? Maybe there are credit card debts and you don't want to continue in that condition.Maybe it's a mortgage. Maybe you are thinking about children starting school or going to a higher level and having to pay more. Maybe you are thinking about having a family holiday beyond the usual expenses. All these items may have to be factored in. What are your goals? Or maybe your car is giving you trouble and you want to buy a new car. Or maybe you don't have a house, you are living in a rented house. So these are not the usual regular items. So after looking at the regular items, you also need to look at these additional items that are all aimed at helping your family to move to a better standard of living, to move to, at the same time, ability to control yourself so that you don't end up in debt and mortgage your own family. So once you have collected all that information, it is now time to just get an exercise book and with your spouse, debate what needs to be, out of the long list, what can be done and what can wait. Because you can also Google up some accounting programs that can help you. But just an exercise book will help you to list all the items against the money and see what items need to be removed in order for the budget to fit in. So what have we said? Set up some uninterrupted time to start discussing the budget. So let your wife, you agree when is it a good time for your wife to be available, or for the husband to be available, so that you can have a time that is not interrupted. Number two, remember, don't when it comes to expenses, when you come to prices in budgeting, you always assume the worst price. And when it comes to income, you always assume the lowest income possible. Don't exaggerate. If you're at the level where you want to say something is cheaper than it is, you budget it, but when it comes to the real purchase, you end up using something you never budgeted for. So it's very important to get that principle of, when it comes to expenses, you always aim at taking the worst case scenario, the worst price possible. And when it comes to income, the least that you are likely to get. So you have looked at all the bills the rent receipts, the mortgage statements, the pay slips, all of them are available, even as you are trying to do your budgeting. And you have also not forgotten small things like haircuts. What about gym entrance fees? All these cost money, and if you forget them, then it will be, and yet you are intended to be involved in them, your budget will not be an appropriate, realistic budget. But my suggestion would be, do not use memory. Try to keep receipts as so that you are basing your figures on realistic numbers. And of course, it's possible if you look at the previous month to see what these figures are. But of course, I know some items are paid for, but there is no receipt. Why can't you just decide that every time you use money, you note it in the notebook, either in your mobile or on a scrap sheet, and then come and draw it in a safe place. So, when actual amounts is what you are basing your budget on, it will really help. And you can now enter into the actual budgeting process. But our discussion is especially on this particular item. We want to emphasize, after doing all that, then you must incorporate contingency expenses into the budget. Because these may be totally unexpected and not imagined, but you need to assume they will be there. And they could be it's a medical, like there could be a medical cover. If it's something that goes beyond your medical cover, it could be household items getting broken and have to be replaced. All those are things that could make a difference. They must all be factored in. Once you have actually made up your budget, it will be then very important that you decide how regular. If it's a monthly budget, why can't you check every weekend how you're progressing? If it's an annual budget, why can't you say every end of the month you look at how you're progressing? Monitor your budget to ensure you have realistically added in the correct expenses. You are not starting to spend things that were never put in the budget. And after doing several budgets, the meeting for budgeting will be a very short meeting, because since there are a lot of things in a family that are regular, the next time if you're budgeting per year, by the third year, you don't even have to spend time. Just say, is there anything you want to change? Is there a new project? The details start aligning themselves very easily. So you need to have that monitoring aspect, because it will certainly be something that will help you in whatever you are planning to do. So I think it will be good to understand right up front the importance of what you are doing, the importance of doing it together with the people. You cannot make a budget for others. If it is something you expect, the expense holders, the ones who are going to spend the money, must participate. If it's your children or adults, they need to be asked for their numbers so that they don't feel like they were forced. But for your spouse, they must participate in the budget so that you are preparing them to make a commitment in the process. A budget is three things. Number one is a prayer item. You have some of the things you are not sure will happen to you. You are by writing a budget, you are creating a prayer list for God to actually help you to get the money and to realize whatever it is you are intending. So it's a prayer budget, is a prayer list. Number two, budget is also a control item, some way of controlling yourself and disciplining yourself, which is a very, very important thing and budget will help you that. But number three, a budget is an agreement. It's a fellowship. People agreeing what they want to actually achieve. And that's why this issue of having contingency in your budget is a very important thing. Whereas we have emphasized, you should not live beyond your means. The only way you can do that is to ensure your budget allows you some items that you do not know about. There are three reasons why you need this space of a certain amount of money which you have not identified what it will be used for. Number one, it allows the two of you not to suffocate each other, to feel like there is something I can do without necessarily being accused of breaking the budget. That freedom is something that people need because it gives them dignity. You do not want your husband to have to ring you because he now has to buy somebody a soda and it was not in the budget. It should fit within your contingency budget if your husband wants to buy his friend a soda. You do not want your wife to have to put in the budget the fact that she has to buy her underwear. It will not make sense. So the first reason why you need to allow a certain percentage of money which you have not identified how it will be used, and it is in your budget, which I'm calling contingency money, is so that you give each other independence to make decisions. Maybe I want to buy you a cup of tea. Maybe I want to buy my mother some Christmas gift or some sort. And it's not a big thing, it's just a small thing. I don't have to actually consult. Maybe I want to buy you, my spouse, something. As long as it's not a major item, surely I don't have to clear with you. So that money needs to be kept there. It will be used without thing. And of course, you may say we are two of us in this budget. You can use 3% or use 2% of the budget. Obviously, my recommendation is that it is not more than 5% because the moment it goes more percent, you are actually now starting to go to where you are not budgeting. You are still doing things on your own way. That's why it always needs to be small. You should seek to identify all the items that are likely to be needed so that all you are living is about a 5% level. So the first reason why you need to allow for this contingency money is so that you allow each other independence, so that you can operate without consulting on that small bit. Number two is because those cost changes are real. They are things that will come you never thought of, and I think it will be very important to understand that if you had never put them there, they could easily mess up your budget. And of course, if they are big and outside your contingency, you may have to quickly meet for an emergency meeting to see what item in the budget needs to be cancelled for this new item to be given priority. Remember, for something to be a priority, it's not enough that it is urgent. It must also be important. Something must be established to be both important and urgent for it to actually change your budget. If it is important but not urgent, it will be put in the next budget. If it is urgent but not important, it can be ignored with very little consequence. So I think it will be important that is something you have in mind as you talk about contingency. This contingency allowance in your budget is designed to cover items of course which are not known by the time even after you have done all the exercise I've been talking about, you don't know. So you cannot include them in your estimate. And even when you do statistical analysis of your expenditure for the last 3 years, maybe it has never happened. So these expenses must be added to the budget. This item percentage must be added must be assumed in the budget without knowing exactly what it will be. finally will happen. If it doesn't happen, what's wrong with some money remaining at the end of the budget period, which can help you to have a bigger beginning amount for the next budget? You know, a contingency budget is money set aside to cover these unexpected processes. It's actually like money on a reserve, not allocated to a particular cost item. Or maybe you can call it some kind of insurance against changes that we had not thought of. That's a good way of looking at it. Most budget will not allow more than 5%. And at the very worst scenario, 10%. But 10% is getting, for a family budget, most items are likely to be known, so we shouldn't be going beyond 5% until they are likely to fully cover any extra costs that are likely to come up that could not be envisaged. This is anything you are planning. You remember, maybe part of your budget is for constructing a house, things like that. And establishing a budget for such a time is not as easy. But you need to, so that you don't enter into a project like we saw in Luke chapter 14, trying to build a tower and you don't end up having not money, you leave it half done. You need to set up a clear plan for what money will be required, and budgeting for all likely scenarios with the details included. But obviously, contingency is assuming after you have done your very best, there may be still some money that becomes needed, and you haven't got to know how to deal with it, and that will be something that you have to still put in the budget. But the thing I'm emphasizing is you need for sure to ensure that is only done after you have thoroughly thought of. That's why we are looking for a time when you're budgeting. It needs to be a time you can concentrate. And you need, before the day of the budget, you need to have been collecting the information. And that will be important. So this money will be important to deal with. But there's something else. Maybe this contingency should also be great for something you have assumed about risk. You are looking at what you have assumed and the fact that it may not happen the way you assumed it. By identifying likely risks, like weather, etc., say things that can change your schedule. If you have budgeting for a holiday, possibility that hotels could change their rate. That will give you a better idea of the kind of things that would happen and why and how much money you need to allow in your contingency. And those are things you can look at. But you need to look for ways of minimizing such risks, but so that you can budget better. So, and that only happens when you're able to go through the people that are likely to be the cause of the changes, like designers, engineers, architects, contractors, and consult them. Let them put some commitments. And because they are expert in that area, they are likely to give you reliable figures. If you are whatever the budget cost item, whoever are the experts, consult them. And and be clear to them about the scope of what you are talking about. Or if you are going to use a subcontractor, talk to them so they can come out and give the maximum variation that could actually happen. And that will be important. But of course, some of the things you can be the cause. As the one who is doing construction, you can change something on the drawing, just as your project is progressing. When you see how it looks like, you say, "Hey, we should have added this. We should improve this before the house is complete." You know, an owner might suggest an upgrade for a better piece of equipment than was originally in the budget. Maybe they went for a visit and saw somebody else having it. And those are some of the difficult things if we are talking about contingency budgeting. Maybe it's about the finishing. You're asking for a finishing. The construction is almost ready. You're asking for a finishing that will cost more money. Then that will add the cost beyond what you had actually budgeted for. So that's why you need to allow for something like that in case it happens without encouraging it to actually happen. If you end up at the end of the year with your total expenses being beyond your budget, you are in trouble. Because you may have to take a loan or to look for a way of looking for money. And it will be expensive money because you do not have long enough to look for it, so that you could go to the cheapest source of money. And that will give you trouble. But if you had contingency budget, it will save you from having to take a loan at a very expensive rate. Of course, by putting contingency budget, it forces you to remove certain items out of your budget. Because you see, that money that you are putting in the contingency is not excess money. It's the same money available for your budget. So something else on the list of items for the year or for the month have to be removed in order to leave this contingency money. So it's very difficult to be putting money aside that is not specific to anything, yet you haven't covered what you regarded as very important items within your budget. But if you don't, when something sudden comes, you may have to look for very expensive money. And that's why contingency is a very important idea. But if in the end you don't use the extra money, wow, hurrah! Like I said, it will give you an opportunity to look at not to look, but to see this extra money. What can I do with it? And that will be something that will be very helpful to you. Let's look at what we read in Luke chapter 14, just to see what Jesus is saying about planning and budgeting. Because one of the reasons many Christians don't budget, and may not even want to put contingency money, is because it's lack of faith. That's not the view Jesus had, and we saw that earlier. But let me read it again. As we look into this issue, I'm looking at verse 25. Large crowds were traveling with Jesus, and turning to them he said, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, fathers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple. And whoever does so, not carry their cross and follow me, cannot be my disciple." In other words, here he is setting up a high standard for discipleship. One of them is love him beyond any other person. But the second one is plan your life. Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Would you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? For if you lay the foundation and are not able to finish it, anyone who sees it will ridicule you, saying, "This person began to build and wasn't able to finish." Or suppose a king is about to go to war against another king. Wouldn't he first sit down and consider whether he is able with 10,000 men to oppose the one coming against him with 20,000? If he is not able, he will send a delegation while the other is still a long way off and will ask for terms of peace. In the same way, those of you who do not give up everything, you cannot be my disciple. So the whole thing is about discipleship. And saying discipleship is total commitment to the master, total allegiance to the master. And you need to plan. Don't just jump and become a disciple. Think through it. And he gives the example of budgeting. That you should not do something without a proper assessment before it happens. In this portion of scripture, Jesus is asking for becoming proactive, thinking ahead. Don't commit yourself only to discover I should not have committed myself. But now it's too late, you have committed yourself. And only a budget. A budget is a forward-looking tool that will help you to think about the future. Once you're able to think about the future, three things will happen. You reassess the way you are living so that you live within your means. Number two, it helps you to know that you need more money, so you may need to do something about increasing your income generating activity, because you are now very clear at the current level of income. You may not be able to reach all the aspirations you actually had. And thirdly and importantly, because of budgeting, you have a prayer list, something you can go to God about in prayer. So it will improve your prayer life, but also improve your communication with your spouse, and it's also help you to live happily. There's nothing worse than having a lender on your case, wanting to sell your property, and all that will happen when you are not people who make budgets. Number one, stick to the budgets, because after all, it is you who made it. You force yourself into it. What does that do? It gives you joy, because you never have to run around. You have planned your life better. And when God gives you more money than you had anticipated, you know what to do with it. Because already the items in the budget that were not covered, and you know them, and you knew what were the priorities among them. So it helps you to live a happy life, a joyful life, because you are able to live within your means. So, my friend, budget, but always live as 5%, maximum 10%, which is available for use without necessarily a debate, because that's contingency money. And number two, it can tackle any sudden increase in items. I think that will be something that will help any marriage, any couple, if they are working together in their budget. I repeat, if it's a family budget, everybody who is involved in it must have the right to say something. Then it is not one forcing the other. Both of you have to debate and get consensus before you put the figures down onto the paper. Once it's agreed, you need to review regularly so that one or both of the parties do not start failing to keep to the budget, and then you discover at the end of the year when you are in debt. So monitor them regularly so that if something is happening, somebody can share why they are being unable to keep within the budget. Number three, keep record of your expenditures. so that you can explain where the money is going. And that way, you have a better family management.